Welcome to the Wanderer's History Podcast. Today we'll talk about Stefan the Great of Moldova, another very important figure of 15th century early modern Eastern Europe. After talking about Vlad the Impaler in the previous episode. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you to please hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already, to make sure you never miss any new material from this podcast. Moldova was a kingdom defined by Dimitrie Cantemir, who we talked about in a previous episode, as east of the Oriental Carpathians, north of Wallachia, bordered, depending on which century we're talking about, by the Prut or Nistru River. A kingdom which saw along the centuries a lot of conflicts between local Moldovans, and mainly, but not only, the advancing Ottoman Empire. Stefan was born in 1438 or 1439 in Borzești, now in the Bacău county of Romania, being the son of noble and Moldovan voivode Bogdan II. The path to the Moldovan throne was complicated. Stefan's father was killed by Petru Aron, who ascended to the throne after assassinating Bogdan II, while the latter was at a wedding at Răușeni. Stefan the Great had support from Hungary and from Vlad the Impaler, ruler of Wallachia. Between the 12th and 14th of April 1457, it is believed by several prominent Romanian historians, including Xenopol Giurăscu Iorga, the encounter was at Doljești. We also have a translated chronicle of Stefan the Great saying the following, quote, "In the year after the birth of Christ, 1457, in the month of April, in the Holy Week before Easter, Stefan Voda arrived. He was the son of Bogdan Voda. Stefan had a small army. He encountered the army against Aron Voda at a little stream called Hraska, near Doljești. This is how Stefan Voda banished Aron Voda from Moldova and therefore claimed the throne of Moldova. Grigore Ureche, one of the very first chroniclers and early historians of Moldova, wrote in the Letopisețul țării Moldovei, a document recording the history of Moldova, quote, "Therefore Stefan Voda gathered the boier, or nobles, of the country, large and small, wealthy or not so wealthy, together with the head church Teoctistu and many monks, and he asked everyone, 'Is it my prerogative to be your ruler?' And all of them shouted in one voice, 'In many years God may bless you. Many years may you rule.' And as a result, everyone agreed, including the head of the church, that Stefan Voda would become ruler of Moldova, and therefore he raised the flag of the realm of Moldova and went to the chair of Suceava. From the very early beginnings of his rule, Stefan the Great attempted reforms of the military and feudal system. As opposed to Vlad the Impaler in Wallachia, Stefan had relatively good relations with the nobles or boyars. He tried to develop a rural and agricultural infrastructure. He also reformed the finances of the Moldovan kingdom, especially through taxation at customs, and we would see many of them. At Cernăuți, there were customs with Poland, at Chilia with the Ottoman Empire, at Cetatea Albă with the Kingdom of Crimea, at Arjud with Hungary, and finally at Putna with close neighbors Wallachia. Stefan also made a series of rules which strengthened the financial power of the voivode, with estates that did not have any heir upon the death of the owners, and those of betrayers of Moldova that would go into the estate of the voivode. Remarkably, he minted an independent Moldovan currency called the Moldovan Gros, made from silver. In terms of foreign policy, historian Adek Xenopol argued that for a reason, the longevity and relative success of Stefan the Great was because he rarely had more than one foreign adversary at the same time. His rule was to make peace with one as he was about to go to war with another. Around the time of his ascension to the throne, Moldova was contested by both Hungary and Poland, while being threatened from the south by the Ottomans. As a result, his reign, which dated from 1457 to 1504, was split into three parts from a military perspective. The first one would be between 1457 and 1469. It was a consolidation stage marked by conflict with Matthias Corvinus, king of Hungary. Here we had the attempt to conquer Kilia, the Battle of Baya, and in 1470, the Lipnik battle with the Tatars. Most noteworthy and important was the Battle of Baya, fought between the 14th and 15th of December, between Moldovan forces which had no more than 20,000 troops at best, and the Kingdom of Hungary led by Matthias Corvinus, who aimed to dethrone Stefan and annex Moldova. The Hungarians had around 40,000 troops and substantial number of cannon at between 300 and 400. Corvinus barely escaped, and this Hungarian defeat at Baya would be a last attempt from Hungary to annex Moldova. Moreover, the anti-Ottoman crusade would actually unite later on Hungary and Moldova against the advancing Ottomans, who were slowly turning Wallachia into a vassal state. This would lead us to the second phase, which arguably was the most turbulent because of the successive conflicts with the Ottoman Empire, but also with several rulers of Wallachia who betrayed his trust, namely Radu the Handsome, brother of Vlad the Impaler, but also Laiot the Basarab and Vlad the Monk. In many respects, Stefan had the power in naming rulers of Wallachia depending on what said ruler's stance was with the Ottoman Empire. As for his fight against the Ottomans, Stefan had to secure peace with Hungary, done so with a truce of 1475 with Matthias Corvinus and an oath of faith or vassality to Casimir IV of Poland. In 1475, on the 10th of January, at Vasloy, also called Podol Înalt at the time, it would see one of the most remarkable victories of the 16th century in Europe. Stefan, with roughly 40,000 troops, including 5,000 Seclers, 1,800 Hungarians, 2,000 Polish troops, faced the army of over 120,000 of Saddam Pasha with support from Wallachians and Bulgarians. In terms of tactics, Stefan had kept a compact line, and he had a large reserve force that managed to catch the Ottomans by surprise. Stefan at Vasloy managed to turn geography and topography into key assets and advantages. The battlefield was a foggy marsh, which made it very difficult for the Ottomans to advance and also recognize the enemy's numbers and location. Taking advantage of the very limited visibility, also the fact that it seemed the Ottomans had little awareness of their local surroundings, Stefan put a few thousand troops in one place, which at one point convinced the Ottomans that that was the entire army, whereas it was split. By the time the Ottomans realized what was happening, they were attacked from many sides near the Bârlad River. By the time they localized the directions of the attack, it was already too late. The weakened, tired Ottoman troops had to drag themselves in retreat, many dying in the process. This allowed for substantial amounts of looting of Ottoman supplies, and it allowed for Stefan the Great to kill a lot of Ottoman retreating troops that aimed to go south of the Danube. It was a remarkable success, which also earned Stefan the Great the honorary title of Atleti Christi, along with John Hunyadi, Louis of Hungary, and Skanderberg of Albania, although Stefan was Orthodox and not Catholic. Pope Sixtus IV lauded Stefan the Great for his anti-Ottoman crusades. This would continue after 1475 in Vasloy. At Valea Albă, or Războieni, the Ottomans returned only to score a very Pyrrhic victory, with Mehmed's army suffering substantial losses and having to withdraw. It would be one of the very few defeats of Stefan the Great of Moldova. Nevertheless, he would bounce back with wins against the Wallachian ruler Basarab the Younger at Râmnic in July 1481, followed by 2 wins against the Ottomans, namely at Catlabuga in November 1485 and Shkea in March of 1486. By 1487, the geopolitical situation had begun to change, with Poland appearing more cooperant towards the Ottoman Empire, and Hungary focusing more on Central Europe, and Wallachia, more or less subdued by the Ottomans. In 1487, Stefan agreed to a peace with the Ottomans in exchange of a yearly tribute. As a result, he looked at alliances east and north with the Muscovites, the Crimeans, and Lithuanians. Between 1497 and 1498, which constitutes the beginning of the third phase, he delivers a series of defeats against Poland led by John Albert, most notably at Kodrikos Minuli, battle fought on the 26th of October 1497 in the Czernowitz region in northern Moldova. His campaign against Poland would be a relative success, and it would secure Moldova's independence from Poland. And in his last years of his reign until 1504, there would be relative stability and not much war going on. What is remarkable is that upon his death in 1504, Stefan the Great left Moldova on peaceful terms with all of its neighbors, had a remarkable military career against Hungarians, Ottomans, Polish, was rarely defeated because of his tenacious military organization, development of forts, and strategic locations. He built many remarkable monasteries, marked to commemorate wins against the Ottomans, such as Voronezh, known for its unique shade of blue, Putna, Namts, and all in all 21 churches and monasteries, many of them UNESCO heritage sites in the present. Stefan the Great is regarded nowadays as a national hero in Moldovan and Romanian history, and in the 2006 televised poll Top 100 Greatest Romanians, he actually finished first. He was canonized by the Orthodox Church and was sanctified as well. A long rule of almost half a century, which drew attention even from Venetians and the papacy, made Stefan the Great an important figure of European history of the second half of the 15th century. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wanderer's History podcast about Moldovan ruler Stefan the Great. Please make sure, if you haven't done so already, to subscribe to the channel and check other episodes and playlists to make sure you never miss any new material from this podcast. Until the next time, all the best.